by author and broadcaster Emma Wolfe and journalist Janelle Aldridge. Woman, it's so great to see you this morning. We were just saying, weren't we, in the break there, January is going on and on and on and on. But look, the light is nearly there.
Touching distance.
Touching distance to February. I wanted to kick off with a story that's dominated the headlines these past few days, the sentencing of Axel Rudiger-Pakana. But the Sunday Times, Emma, has that picture of those three little girls, along with the story about the failings of Prevent.
Of Prevent in the northwest of England, but also the counter-terrorism police at Greater Manchester Police. And how many times, and you're right, it's dominated the headlines. It's been such an appalling case, and particularly this week with the killer, who maybe I just won't name because, you know, we've seen his image so many times.
It's so important, isn't it?
I'm really glad that we see the little girls. Absolutely. He's been given a lot of prominence, actually. Anyway, he was sentenced on Thursday, 52 years. He was just short. As we know, he was, 9 days short of his 18th birthday, so he was not given a full life term. And yeah, now this big, very important report, I think, in the Sunday Times, talking about the many, many failings, the many opportunities that when Rudiger-Pakana could have been picked up, he was repeatedly, for example, searching for information on school shootings, on the London Bridge terror attacks, on the IRA, on Nazi Germany, on MI5. And I'm afraid the Prevent team and the Safeguarding Hub concluded that he had an unusual interest in the news and world affairs. When someone is such a red flag and has even confessed to, I've been carrying a knife. He rang Childline and talked about carrying a knife. He was obsessed with extreme violence. And whatever you can and cannot predict, whatever you can and cannot prevent, there were clearly many, many opportunities which were not followed up here.
Yeah, lots of referrals not followed through, different departments not talking to each other.
Safeguarding hubs, which were actually more about safeguarding him in the end, talking about his mental health, giving him a diagnosis of autism, which is very important, but actually those three little girls were not safeguarded.
But I think it's also interesting what's been said is that, you know, there's a serious problem when people don't quite meet the threshold of what they would say is someone we're going to seriously investigate. But you still need to take some urgent action instead. And a lot of those people are the people that are, and it's horrific to use terms like falling through the cracks, because that just does not go far enough as to what we've now seen resulted in. But it is interesting to think, OK, well, if there's a cause to investigate someone in the first place, and then as you say, other things say, OK, well, he doesn't reach a threshold for us to think there's imminent danger. But what does happen to those people? Because you still have to have a sense of we're still looking, we're still investigating, we're still sort of keeping an eye on. Because in the end, what the three pictures bring it down to is that when there's a failing, when someone doesn't check, when something falls through the cracks, this is the real-world consequence. And this real-world consequence has caused so many ripples that it's really important that they kind of get a handle on what Prevent is there to do and making sure that it does it.
A country reeling from the loss of these three girls and families
if this case doesn't meet the threshold, when you go through the amount of times and the things that occurred in the run-up, in the years leading up to this attack, if that doesn't meet the threshold, then one has to wonder what other people are out there.
I mean, from our position, we can't see what they saw, every single thing they saw, but there's obviously something that needs to be done in terms of how they investigate people and follow it right through.
Let's move on to The Observer now, and a poll suggesting that Sir Keir Starmer and his administration should move closer to the EU, trading ties with the EU, rather than President Donald Trump.
So now 46% of 15,000 people surveyed think that, and 21% think actually we should move closer to the US. And I think it is really interesting, even in Nigel Farage's seat of Clacton, more people think the UK should be trading with the EU. I think with Rachel Reeves saying that Brexit has actually harmed the UK economy and we want to see some gains back and we want to look for growth, the thing is we are situated within Europe. And so when it comes to trading with the US, presidents will come and go. At the moment, it's Donald Trump. He doesn't seem that much pro-UK all the time. But there'll be a new president. But that's the flip-flopping of American politics. And actually, I do think we should be moving closer towards the situation that we are actually in and trying to make that work well for us, because that makes so much sense to me. Do you want to have a better relationship with your next-door neighbour or the people down the street, your next-door neighbour?
The other side of that is saying that Donald Trump isn't a fan of Europe. You know, he's said all sorts of things about NATO, about how much NATO should be spending on defence spending, and shouldn't the Prime Minister have better relationships with the US? Because whatever tariffs that he may pass down on Europe, if we're closer to Europe, potentially that comes back to our doorstep.
Yeah.
That's one argument.
Exactly, and I was very surprised by this poll. It's an MRP poll, and they are very accurate. They do, you know, they use large data samples, so there's no kind of question. But it was carried out by YouGov for Best for Britain, so you know that's just a point. And I think you're right. I think there's a real opportunity with Trump. He is fond of the UK actually, but no, not keen on Europe.
Yeah.
And I think we should have got off to a much better footing. I mean, the first phone call between the new president and the Prime Minister is happening this week. Probably quite a frosty phone call and discussions about Chagos and difficult issues like that. But I think we should be capitalising on that. It's a huge market, and I think that a lot of people were cheering the States on and were feeling quite envious of the United States. It was only 4 days ago. What a week it's been. Only 4 days ago that his inauguration happened. So, yeah, surprising that people are allegedly wanting us to move closer to Europe only, 7 years after the Brexit vote?
Yeah, but I think it's because the Brexit vote is clearly, it didn't work. Look, with Brexit, we were voting on an ideology, not a plan, and I think that is always a recipe for disaster. We weren't voting on what is going to happen, we voted on what do we ideologically
how it would be carried through.
think is the best thing for us. So that's always tricky. But again, with Trump, he's so volatile. You know, yes, he likes us today, but then if we say no on certain things, will he like us tomorrow? It's very hard to build a close relationship with someone who changes their mind dependent on which way the wind's blowing. So I can see why people think Europe is more stable, but then there's a lot going on in Europe that is far right and not in line with our left-wing government.
Elections in Germany.
Who knows?
Yeah. I wanted to end briefly on the Sunday Telegraph. Rachel Reeves is on Sunday Morning with Trevor Phillips later, but Reeves at war with Labour's blockers. You know, she wants to get rid of barriers to business, doesn't she?
Yeah.
And also kind of any green projects, she wants to make it harder for big projects to
be blocked.
Expansions potentially of airports. Heathrow,
yeah, I mean, these are
Gatwick.
strong words from the Chancellor, who's just sort of coming out swinging, I think, now. But this rift appears to be...
Very different from the Chancellor that we heard in the budget.
Yes, exactly. And I think she has been... I think she feels she's on the back foot. People have even talked about, you know, her sort of being reshuffled out soon at some point or thrown under the bus or whatever. But she does seem to be coming out swinging this morning. It'd be really interesting to see her on Trevor Phillips. But there appears to be this rift widening between number 11, between the Treasury and the sort of more left-wing, they call them left-wing, but Ed Miliband and the London Mayor Sadiq Khan, particularly over her choice, her desire, her drive to prioritise economic growth over these net zero targets. So she wants to, this is ahead of her big infrastructure and planning and infrastructure bill this spring, and that's going to try and clear away a lot of red tape. And again, the Prime Minister and the Chancellor are both on course for a bit of a collision with these lefties, apparently, over their support. Well, they're not lefties, but that's what they classify as left-wing now, over their support for the third Heathrow runway. So that'll be another one coming down the track.
She's going to need some support, and I think what is clear to me, they haven't learnt from the budget where they came out strong and then actually nothing kind of happened. So she'll need their support. So
absolutely. Ladies, we'll have to leave it there. We'll be back with more after the break.
Mandatory evacuation, you must